you're saying, based on your knowledge of how he works, this is not just more chatter. We just were talking to his niece about distraction, which he also does. You're saying this is part of a plan. If he doesn't get what he wants out of the election results, he wants to push Barr to what?
To start indicting people, specifically, I guess, people working at the ballots. You will recall, Ari, that I said just over 19 months ago when I testified before the House Oversight Committee that there will never be a peaceful transition of power by Trump. And I was right. And everybody's using the same exact language. 19 months ago, I said it because I understand Trump. Trump has tasted what he deems to be the ultimate power, not the ultimate power for the American people, but the ultimate power for himself. And he has no interest and no intent on giving it up without a hell of a fight. And now he has Bill Barr on his side, who's willing to do whatever he said, i.e. putting me in prison because I refused to waive my First Amendment constitutional right and not publish the book. But more than that, he's reckless with power. And that's really the big problem.
Yeah, and that's a part of all of this as we head towards this second debate and other news we're seeing today out of Michigan and the serious violence and alleged plots to kidnap people. So we're going to get to all of that. On the COVID
Didn't he already say also, Ari, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
Didn't he say he's not going to do the second debate because he doesn't believe in virtual debates? He's going to host a rally.
He's claiming he won't do virtual. He did virtual with Fox News, but your view of that negotiating tactic?
Well, he did it once before. You may remember, and then he claimed that he had raised $6 million for the veterans, which was not true, and took, thank goodness, to some fine journalist in order to get them to dish out the money that was in the Trump Foundation. But no, I believe that he does not want to debate. He did a terrible job the last time, so why put himself through that when he's already down in the poll?
Very interesting. I also want to ask you about, of course, we mentioned Trump's penchant for secrecy, limiting his medical care. That meant that 2 qualified doctors were literally barred from treating him because they balked at these secrecy NDA contracts, a pattern from taxes to how Trump has deployed, of course, our guest tonight, Michael Cohen, who was then his personal lawyer, arranging NDAs as hush payments to Stormy Daniels. Trump was so secretive, he hid his own name on the very contract designed to protect him. Recall, he used this pseudonym, David Dennison, then still refused to sign. And the past matters, even when those measures failed and all became public. A turning point, as Michael, I'm sure you remember, was Trump telling a lie that the evidence later rebutted. He claimed he didn't know what was going on and everyone should just ask Michael. Take a look.
You have to ask Michael. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Michael, we know, as I mentioned, that he did know what was going on. What do you see as the point here for voters to assess secrecy on taxes, secrecy on health care, secrecy on his personal dealings?
Well, I think you forgot one very important thing that I talk about quite a bit in the book, Disloyal. The fact that he tasked me in order to keep his grades, starting from New York Military Academy to Fordham to University of Pennsylvania, and to provide them with threats of significant economic ruin in the event that they fail to keep his document, forget about anybody else, his specific educational document secret. And that they do that for everybody anyway, but he wanted to make doubly sure, which is exactly the same thing that's going on here at Walter Reed. I mean, doctors do not release information. We know we have this HIPAA, and they just don't unilaterally release information. He just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that if you speak about my medical condition, and the only reason he's afraid, because he's in horrific shape. He has high blood pressure, probably high cholesterol. There's probably a whole slew of issues with him. And that would contradict what he had one of the other doctors come out earlier and say that Donald Trump is the fittest president that we've ever had. Yeah,
Did you think his grades were low?
President jogging, I know for a fact that they were low.
Yeah. So that goes to the basic inference here, which is you're hiding the things that look bad. In that back and forth litigation ultimately about the NDAs of Donald Trump and the hush payments, you, of course, famously sparred, and viewers remember, with Michael Avenatti. I want to play for you some of what he's said. Michael Avenatti, of course, at the time was litigating against you. He had a lot of big talk about problems that he thought Trump and you would face legally. And he spoke out as well. I'm sure you remember sooner or later you learned of it during your ordeal. Take a look.
I think time is running out on Michael Cohen.
You're saying Michael Cohen, in your view, is likely to be arrested by the end of the summer?
Yes.
Michael Cohen is neither a hero nor a patriot. He lied for months on end about his criminal conduct and the role of the President of the United States. This is an outrage. He deserves every day of the 36-month sentence.
Mr. Avenatti has since spent time in prison awaiting trial. He's facing some pretty serious charges himself. Your response?
Well, as you all know, my charges stem from lying to Congress and campaign finance violation, amongst other things, where I pled guilty to a tax evasion charge that would not be a tax evasion charge under any circumstance other than the fact that I was Michael Cohen and they needed their conviction and they needed to put something in that was not related to Donald Trump. Unlike Mr. Avenatti, who stole money from people, I've never owed a dollar to anybody. The judge himself even stated there's no economic loss to any individual or any institution ever in my life. And mine is all simply because of my proximity to Trump. His problems stem from his own corrupt behavior. And I, despite the fact that he was happy that I was going to prison, wanted me to do all 36 months, I don't wish that for him. I don't wish it for anybody.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.